Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Angelo Letizia. I am the acting assistant dean in place of Dr. Lisa Pallett. And just want to say hello to everybody gathered here for this defense. So I think it would make sense if we all just very briefly went around and just introduce ourselves. Just to speed it up, I will call people on my ticker here. So Dr. Shi, you are first. Can you just introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Yovishi. I'm an assistant professor at Notre Dame right now.
Thank you. Dr. Savick?
Hi, everyone. Stephanie Savick. I mostly teach in the graduate and PhD programs. Good to be with you today.
Dr. Snyder?
Hey, Lauren. I'm Dr. Angela Snyder. I'm an associate professor, and like Stephanie, I mostly teach in the doctoral program now. Good to see you.
Dr. Durham?
Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you, Creation and Lauren. I don't need to introduce myself to you because I'm on your committee.
Well, and with that, Dr. Guidry, I'm going to let you do your introduction and I'm going to let you do Lauren's as well. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm Dr. Guidry. I'm honored to be the chair of Ms. Duncan's committee here, and I'm also very honored that Dr. Durham and Dr. Shi have been working closely with her and going through the material and stuff and what we have. Really looking at it, I have found it was initially challenging, and then Miss Duncan has just done a phenomenal job in really bringing it together. It was kind of one of those where it was like there were several pieces when I first got introduced as the chair of the committee, and then she really just once the pieces connected, she really went and caught on fire with it and stuff. And I think it's remarkable work. I love what I'm seeing there. The potential of it is truly, I think, inspiring in what I've been able to see and read of it and stuff like that. So I don't want to steal her thunder. And so we're gathered here, Ms. Duncan, as the proposal defense. And remember, through all of this, we are guides. We're here to help you. This is all part of a constructive, beneficial experience for you. And so look at us as people here to help, people here to advise, and people here to support. And we are very fascinated with your work. So I will turn it to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. It's nice to meet those of you who I haven't met before. Can I share?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay. Make this small. Okay. So like it's been said, I'm Lauren. I have a little bit of background on me. I have been trying to find my way through this proposal defense for quite some time. I'm fortunate that Dr. Durham has been there since day one, and I have really formed a good relationship with Dr. Guidry as we've been working through the last couple months together as well. And then the outside reader on my committee is Dr. George Roberts. My proposal title is The Relationship Between Teacher Academic and Behavioral Ratings of Students Involved in Extracurricular Activities and Their Relationship to Academic Self-Concept. This stemmed from a personal experience of mine teaching in middle school, where I've noticed that our teachers really hold students who they believe to be involved in extracurricular activities to a higher standard, as opposed to students who are not involved, or teachers believe they're not involved. So while talking through this, I was able to explore the previous literature, and I found that there is a gap for that middle school student focus on the data. And so that's what my proposed study will aim to fill, is that 8th grade specific gap. So as we go through, I'll share with you the research on extracurricular activities, teacher bias, the rationale for the research, my theoretical and conceptual frameworks, my research questions, and my research methodology. I would ask that you keep in mind the definitions for these 4 areas as they will be referred to throughout my proposal defense. So implicit bias, that is when automatic judgments occur spontaneously when a person is presented with some form of stimulus. The bias of crowds theory, which states that people have bias based on a whole group, not necessarily individual people, and in this case, students. academic self-concept, which is how a person perceives themselves through academic experiences and the interpretation of their environment, and teacher expectations, which are inferences that teachers make about the present and future academic achievement and general classroom behavior of students. So extracurricular activities has been studied in for more than 80 years. It's been a really popular topic for study. More recently, in 2015, there was a study done that showed that 73% of parents indicated that their child participated in some sort of extracurricular activity. And then in 2020, the research was a little bit more specific on girls versus boys. So we found that 29% of girls were involved in clubs and 24% of boys involved in clubs. And with school sports, there were 35% of girls playing sports and 44% of boys playing sports. The last 30 years, the focus on the research of extracurricular activities has shown that teachers do hold students involved in extracurriculars to higher expectations for their academic performance compared to their non-participatory peers, which was my experience that kind of got this research going. So now the focus for me is a little bit more specific. So as we're looking at the extracurricular activity involvement, the proposed study will operationalize extracurricular activity involvement as student-reported participation in school-based team sports, school drama or music clubs, and other school-based clubs such as yearbook, newspaper, hobby, or photography. And this comes from the ECLSK 98-99 study. The research shows that students choose extracurricular activities based on the requirements of the activity, their parental education attainment. The students who have parents with higher educational attainment are more likely to engage in activities, the student gender, the student race, and the socioeconomic status of both the student and the school community. The extracurricular activity involvement impacts students in that it minimizes the unwanted negative behavior that students often demonstrate in classes. It also increases student retention and graduation rates, particularly among students from those low SES backgrounds. Extracurricular involvement increases college attendance, and then it decreases the risky behaviors such as drug and alcohol use. Will increase student mental health and increase social success for students. So as teachers are observing their students, they're able to see all of these impacts of the extracurricular activities, and that's what leads teachers to make assumptions and ultimately judge students. The influences on the teacher perceptions of students. So in addition to all of the things that I just shared of students, the behaviors that students might show, teachers are also influenced based on the student motivation, the behavior of the student or the student conduct, the academic skills of the student or their cumulative folder, their interest in the class, the teacher cognition or bias, student attractiveness, student race, previously taught siblings, name stereotypes, and one parent versus two parent homes, and then of course extracurricular activity involvement. So there are a lot of things that go into how teachers form perceptions of students and the impact that that has on students. So the teacher perceptions can be seen as implicit bias, which can influence the educational experience for all students. Often teachers are unaware that they hold these stereotypes for the groups of students. So if we have a group of students in the hallway and they're behaving in a favorable way, and we know that they're involved in all of the academic clubs, we might assume that they're just overall going to be great all the time in class because we know the the impacts of extracurricular involvement. But whenever teachers have their expectations set based on all of the different parts of the student that might come with that, that may be influenced by the bias the teacher holds. When teachers hold bias, the research shows that students will perform lower academically when they are with teachers who are identified as biased, as compared to students who have unbiased teachers. While bias is not always a bad thing, in schools, the research has shown that usually teachers are judging students on they're going to be good, they're going to be not good, and this is why, and the the parts of the extracurricular impact that come with that. So it's not always a bad thing to have bias, but in this instance, we're talking about the negative bias. So recognizing teacher bias is a crucial step toward creating the equitable learning environment and supporting the development of positive academic self-concept for all students. Prior research shows that academic self-concept develops as students age. So as they broaden their range of participation in extracurricular activities, they start to solidify their academic self-concept. Specifically in middle school, the development of academic self-concept will impact future academic and social success in and out of school. So the gap in the research really is to what extent does 8th grade student involvement in extracurricular activities influence teacher perceptions of those 8th grade students? And how does it all connect to the bias of student performance? So the research really calls for more focus in the areas of student academic effort and behavior performance. There is a relationship between teacher ratings of students, their overall behavior, overall effort, but there's not specific academic performance and specific behaviors, but there's not research in the overall general behavior, general effort, general self-concept that will be looked at in the proposed study. The teacher ratings of student performance and academic self-concept, the prior research does not examine the relationship between student behavior, academic effort, and academic self-concept for 8th grade students when considering the extracurricular activity involvement, and that's one thing that the proposed study will do. And middle school students, there's not research on middle school students in looking at the relationship between academic effort, behavior, academic self-concept, and extracurricular activities. There is research on the adolescent groups of like ages 13 to 21. There's lots of research on high school, elementary school, but there's not much at all on middle school students and school extracurricular activity involvement. So to fill these gaps, a proposed study will identify the relationship between academic self-concept and extracurricular involvement of 8th grade students in the United States, and how teacher perceptions of students influence student academic self-concept. So this will be done by examining the perceptions teachers form of students as measured by teacher ratings of student academic effort and behavior, and forming a deeper understanding of the extent to which teacher ratings are mediated or moderated by student participation in extracurricular activities. Additionally, the proposed study will add to the literature on teacher perceptions of students and the relationship between teacher ratings and student academic self-concept. The proposed study will provide insight to support educators in becoming aware of how they rate students involved in extracurricular activities compared to students not involved in extracurricular activities and the impact of those ratings. And support the understanding of the implications of teacher ratings on student academic self-concept and whether these ratings teachers assign to students are mediated or moderated by students' sense of social belonging. My theoretical framework uses the areas of ecological systems theory by Brenner, which says that humans develop through layers. And so the extracurricular activity layer would be the mesosystem, the things like in the classroom, the clubs that help influence the way the students develop. And then social comparison theory, temporal comparison theory, and dimensional comparison theory all build on one another. So social comparison theory looked at the importance of social experiences like involvement in clubs and sports on someone's development. Temporal comparison theory built on that and found that people will compare themselves to others if they're similar in some aspect. So if our students are involved in an extracurricular activity, they will compare themselves to the other people there because there is a similarity, and that can definitely influence the academic self-concept. And the dimensional comparison theory contrasts the experiences that influence the development of academic self-concept. So the different experiences in the classroom versus in the sport, in the classroom versus in the club, the sports versus the clubs, all of those areas come together to influence the development of self-concept. A look at my conceptual framework. So there are still some big questions here from the prior research. How did teacher perceptions of student academic effort and classroom behavior vary by extracurricular involvement? And how is this relationship associated with student academic self-concept? Does student involvement in extracurricular activities mediate or moderate the ratings teachers assign to student academic effort and classroom behavior? To what extent are teacher ratings of academic effort and classroom behaviors influenced by students' extracurricular activity involvement? And what are the relationships between extracurricular involvement, teacher-rated student behavior, teacher-rated academic effort, and student academic self-concept? The proposed study will aim to fill these gaps in these questions with 4 research questions. The first one being, to what extent do teacher academic and behavior ratings of students vary by student extracurricular involvement? The second question will answer, to what extent do differential academic and behavior ratings between extracurricular and non-extracurricular involved students are mediated by students' sense of social belonging? The third question will answer, what is the relationship between teacher academic and behavior ratings of students and student academic self-concept? And the fourth question will answer, to what extent are the relationships between academic self-concept and teacher ratings mediated or moderated by extracurricular involvement? As mentioned earlier, the data source for this study will be the early childhood longitudinal study from the kindergarten class of 98-99. Oops. And so this data were collected through multi-stage probability sampling that represented children in kindergarten during the 98-99 school year. There'll be 4 constructs that will be used to, 5 constructs that will be used to answer those research questions. The first one being teacher-rated academic effort. So this composite variable will be averaged. All the individual variables from the ECLS case study will be averaged to create a composite variable that represents teacher-reported academic effort. For teacher responses, the options for these questions were either yes, no, not applicable, or a 6-point Likert scale, depending on the question. Extracurricular activity involvement. These variables were collected from, the responses for these variables were collected from students on a yes or no scale based on whether or not they were involved with the varying activities. And these variables will be combined to create a composite variable where 1 is extracurricular activity involvement and 0 is no involvement reported. The student academic self-concept variable will be averaged, have all of the ECLS case studies in front of you averaged to create a composite variable that represents student academic self-concept. And while there's no clear one definition or one variable from ECLSK that means academic self-concept explicitly, these variables from this study were the ones that were most connected to what the literature says about the components of academic self-concept. Teacher-rated student behavior were variables that required responses from teachers using 4-point Likert scales. So each of the variables had a similar question and teachers responded. And these variables will be combined and averaged to create a composite that ranges between 1 and 4, representing the teacher-rated student behavior. And finally, school social belonging. Student responses for these variables were recorded using a 4-point Likert scale. And again, like the others, these will be averaged to create a composite variable that can be used to respond to the research questions. So the data analysis for the proposed study will be conducted using linear regression models. Prior to analyzing the data, I will use Chromebox Alpha to determine the reliability of the proposed composite variables and run descriptive analysis to ensure that assumptions for linear regression have been met. So if Chromebox Alpha is at least 0.7, then the composite variables we use as proposed. Otherwise, I will enter them separately. Control variables for the proposed study are race, gender, and socioeconomic status. So gender, coming from the ECLS case study, will be used as the variable gender and be coded as male is 1, female 0. Multiple races will be considered from the race variable, and mutually exclusive dummy variables for each racial category will be created, where the analysis uses white non-Hispanic as a reference category. The proposed study will use a quantitative correlational design to analyze existing data collected from a nationally represented kindergarten cohort and their teachers 9 years later when the students were in 8th grade. And that will allow for generalization to the population represented by the original cohort. This will also have descriptive and multivariate approaches. And using this data set will allow for control variables to account for confounding factors that could otherwise bias results. So having student reported gender, race, SES is going to keep the researcher from collecting data and having biased responses. So research question 1 will be answered by testing one bivariate and one multivariate regression model. And the independent variable for all of the models will be extracurricular activity involvement. The first 2 regression models for research question 1 will regress teacher-rated student behavior and teacher-rated academic effort on extracurricular involvement. The second regression model will control for race, SES, and gender. And this will aim to start to answer the research hypothesis that teacher ratings will be higher for students involved in extracurricular activities. And the null hypothesis for this is extracurricular involvement does not relate to teacher ratings of academic effort and behavior. Research question 2 will continue the investigation from research question 1 by further examining influences of extracurricular activity involvement on teacher ratings, as in research question 1, but then incorporate that school social belonging. So the first regression model here will focus on teacher-rated academic effort, include the independent variable of extracurricular activity involvement, and those demographic controls of race, gender, SES, and finally add in the variable school social belonging to explore how that variable mediates the relationship as defined in research question 1. The second regression model for research question 2 will regress teacher-rated student behavior on all
No,
of
ma'am. No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I.
Oops. The second regression model will regress teacher-rated student behavior on those same set of variables as in the first one. And the results of this analysis will determine if extracurricular involvement remains a significant predictor of teacher ratings when controlling for student social belonging as rated by students. For research question 3, the focus of this question will be to find whether student academic self-concept is driven by teacher ratings for behavior and academic effort while controlling for gender, SES, and race. This will be a 3-step process. So first, the regression model will regress academic self-concept on teacher-rated academic performance and the control variables. The second regression model will regress academic self-concept on teacher-rated behavior and the control variables. And the third regression model will combine the teacher-rated academic effort and classroom behavior to determine if they maintain independent effects on a student's academic self-concept. And finally, the fourth research question we'll use, again, a 3-step process to investigate whether relationships between student academic self-concept and teacher ratings differ when extracurricular activity is considered. So that first regression model will regress academic self-concept on teacher-rated performance and student extracurricular activity involvement to determine whether extracurricular involvement mediates the relationships identified in research question 3. The second regression model will be the same model used in step 1, expanded to include teacher academic ratings, extracurricular times extracurricular involvement, and teacher behavior ratings times extracurricular involvement to determine if the relationships between these teacher ratings and academic self-concept are stronger or weaker for extracurricular involved students. And the third regression model will be the same as the second and include all of the control variables. The reliability and validity of the proposed study was determined through the ECLS K98 study. A couple of important areas to note that the 98 data collection were collected in group settings on paper for 8th grade rather than independently and only collected on the internet like in the 5th grade wave. So there was a little bit of a difference there. And there was a shift from 3 questionnaires to for the 5th grade collection to only 2 forms for 8th grade, but this shift showed no change in reliability. And again, I will make sure the Chromebox Alpha, Chromebox Alpha is used to determine the reliability of the composite variables that I have created. A few limitations of the proposed study are the age of the data collected in the ECLS K98 study. However, the most recent ECLS case study from 2011 that is available did not have an 8th grade wave collection. So the 98 study is the most recent 8th grade data. There is a lack of depth on the reporting of the level of extracurricular engagement for students, which prior research does show can influence the outcomes and the impacts of the involvement. There's a lack of data addressing whether teacher expectations in the beginning of the school year influence their perceptions. So coming in fresh from the beginning of the year, how did that influence their perceptions? And also a lack of analysis on the predictors of extracurricular activity involvement for participants, like what is their parental attainment, their gender, their race, all of those things. How do they influence whether the students are involved in extracurricular activities? Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So now we are ready for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll
I
ask
can
a
ask
question.
one.
Go ahead,
Um,
Stephanie.
Yeah, so Lauren, that was magnificent. Very comprehensive in terms of what you're actually studying with those 4 research questions. My question related more to some of the content you were presenting from the lit review to help you frame your study in the lens. And I think it was around slide 10 or so when you were talking about bias, and you emphasized the fact that not all bias is bad. And I was kind of wondering whether, I guess how you meant that, because I'm wondering if you meant that not all bias is negative, right? Some bias can be positive, but I'm wondering because I'm thinking of the example of something like the model minority myth, where there are positive associations with being an Asian American student. And the assumption is if I have a biased view is you're going to be fine because you're Asian American, but in a way that can hurt Asian American students. So I just wanted some clarity around, I guess, the vocabulary you're using to describe bias as good or bad.
Yeah, that's a great question. So exactly as you had said, my intent with that comment was that while we might see extracurricular activity involvement as a good thing, that might be some good bias, some positive bias towards that group of students. It can also it can hurt the students with teachers just saying, oh, they're involved, they're going to be fine. But on the flip side of that, sometimes we see students and we assume that based on their behavior, that they are not involved in a club. And so that then leads teachers to have the negative perceptions of students without even getting to really know them as individuals. Does that clarify?
It does. I just wanted you to be careful about defining good and bad bias when you're thinking about writing that up in your lit review.
Okay.
All right. I just have one suggestion, but it actually is not it's not a question. So you probably can think in some reasons why students want to take some actual curriculum activities. Because a lot of elite college require the student to submit their application with some actual curriculum activities or competitions. So probably you can ask something like that. I have another question. Can you just clarify what is your dependent variables and independent variables? I cannot see from your PowerPoint.
Yeah, so the independent variable is extracurricular activity involvement. That is the same for each of the research questions. So, and then the dependent variables will be the academic effort, the academic self-concept, the student behavior, and then the social belonging.
Okay. Okay. When you write your formal dissertation, you need to clarify what is your independent variable and what your dependent variable. It's pretty important. So you, based on your PowerPoint, I feel a little bit ambiguity. So you need to clarify when you write your dissertation, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And I'd actually like to ask a follow-up question to something that Dr. Savitt said. And, you know, looking at bias, I'm wondering, I know you are grouping together sports, drama, and then other clubs. Did you consider breaking those apart and actually looking at them separately?
So I did consider that, but my thought also was there's not research like really at all with middle school students. So having a general outlook on the extracurricular involvement overall is a good place to start. And then stemming from my personal experience too, what I see in schools is it doesn't really matter what activity they're in. Teachers are automatically assuming you're in a club. I'll go tell your sponsor, I'll call your coach, whatever, whoever's in charge adult wise. So that's why I chose to group them all together.
Okay. I was wondering if it would add to, you know, because you said there isn't anything out there. I wonder if you could do both. I mean, or if that just gets too big and makes this, you know, too many analysis run when your overall question is more just extracurricular activity.
Yeah, and I think that's also a possibility. But also that's something to consider, for potential future research.
Futures, yeah.
Well, even
Thanks.
so, I mean, it is something that we talked about along the way, Lauren, if you remember. I think it's a good point, and it may just it probably needs to be fed by some of the descriptive work you do on the data to begin with. I'm wondering how much overlap there is. There's a lot of overlap in the types of things they're participating in. Like that wouldn't necessarily add value, but if these are distinct groups, then perhaps there is value. So I would let that guide your decision during the analysis part, and we can work on that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I could add too, that's something actually I was gonna point your attention to. Like what Dr. Snyder said, I don't know if it's worth a whole nother study or maybe just at least a mention, but even just I was a teacher and I know from my experiences, if students were in different clubs versus sports or versus whatever, it could impact, the myth of, this kid's a football player, he's not very smart, or this person's in, so just things like that. Again, like Dr. Snyder said, you can't do everything, right? So, but at least mentioning that could be a possibility. If you don't follow that, that's fine. If you do keep them together, I think it's okay. But at least make a mention. I don't know if it's necessarily a limitation, but it's definitely something for the reader to at least note.
Okay, thank you.
And it might be something that, when you point to a future study, it might be something that's even more impactful in high school, and you're looking specifically at middle school. So, it was just something that popped into my head while you were talking.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
Lauren, I had one more question. And so you may have already addressed this, and I apologize if you did. But since you are using the 98 data, I guess you don't know what you don't know, right? But do you foresee any sort of issues with that? What's the major issue with the 26-year lag? I mean, has extracurricular activities changed, or has the perception of them changed, or have do you think there's anything to that?
Yeah. So I know that, technology as a whole, I feel like influences all the things our kids do. But I did notice whenever I was doing the original, like looking to see the extracurricular activity stats that I had introduced in the very beginning, there's still, more of half of our students in part of some club and or a sport. So extracurricular activities are still a thing. And while there's a smaller percentage from 73% down to that about half when you combine the boys and girls in 2020, it still, kids are still involved, teachers are still judging students. So I think overall that's still relevant. But in the composite variables, one of the things that influence the teacher rated student behavior, academic effort, was how often the student completes homework. And that came from the predictors of academic effort and self-concept and all of those components from the literature. But I also know now, 20 some years later, we don't really give homework anymore. So that might
that's
not
true.
be part of it. The different types of clubs that are available have shifted. I mean, sports isn't just football, basketball, soccer anymore. Now you have esports and all of those other components. So I definitely think there are some limitations to looking at the older data, but overall, kids are kids and school is school. And so I think that kind of big picture is still relevant.
Okay. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, well, at this point, Lauren, I'm gonna put you back in the waiting room as well as the guests, and we are going to confer. So just give me one moment while I do that. And then Dr. Snyder or somebody, please remember or help me remember to stop the.
Go ahead and actually pause the recording now.
Discussed your proposal. Oop, all right. So welcome back. We have discussed your proposal, and there's some guidance, some things we kind of want to make sure that you kind of follow some parameters. But overall, if I'm not mistaken, I want to make sure we have approved, and we're very excited about it, and we're looking forward to you continuing that work and us supporting you as your committee with it and such. So I want to thank the university board, all the people here for their guidance with it and stuff in this journey as we continue through. And also to applaud your courage in this gap that you're tackling, and also to not be discouraged, because seldom do things ever work out as you think. You've got certain assumptions and things you're going into it with, and I can be sure that there will be some surprises, and probably some pleasant surprises, but surprises nonetheless. And we're here every step of the way to help you to get through and stuff, because we're very excited to see the findings of what you have as you contribute your research to the greater understanding of what we have in education.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm so excited. Ready.
Congrats. Yay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
Reach out. Let's schedule. Let's start looking at the data.
Yes. Yes.
Re-up your SPSS license.
I know.
Congratulations, Lauren.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I'll let
Celebrate.
Dr.
Do
Pallet know.
something to
She's going to be
celebrate.
excited.
Yeah,
Yes,
she will.
celebrate. Do something fun. Enjoy. These are the moments you got to definitely celebrate with it. So do something fun.
Yes.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
text Dr. Pallet right now.
Okay. Thanks. And I'll send you
Yeah.
guys an email to
Yeah,
figure
I
it out.
texted her that you were knocking it out of the park during the presentation. So really good job.
Thank you.